Welcome to Legends of Grayskull, the podcast that dives deep into the mythology of Masters of the Universe, with your hosts Matthew Dooch and Shawn Scavana. News, reviews, remasterings and more are just ahead on Legends of Grayskull.
Hello everybody and welcome back to Legends of Grayskull, the fan podcast where we dive deep into the history, the mystery, the magic, and mythology of He-Man, She-Ra, Eternia, Etheria, Nordor, Primus, New Adventures, Old Adventures, Ladybird, Kate Annuals, anything and everything you can think of with that He-Man, She-Ra, Masters of the Universe, Princess of Power, that Mattel logo, down in the corner. I am Matthew Dooch, here again with Shawn Scavana. How are we doing today, Shawn?
I'm doing all right. I'm ready to take a drink from the chalice today.
There we go. We're gonna be representing the mighty motherboard as we dive deep into episode 2 of Masters of the Universe Revelation, streaming now exclusively on Netflix. So, episode 2. If you guys haven't seen, this is our breakdown video here. We're going to dive deep. We're going to go beginning to end of episode 2. Episode 1's available now. Go check it out. I'll include a link down in the description there. And yeah, we're going to have some fun. So episode 2 is The Poisoned Chalice. This was directed by Adam Conroy and Patrick Stannard. And it was written by Dia Mishra. And I hope I said that all correctly, Dia. If not, my apologies. And of course, this premiered on July 23rd, 2021, as all of these episodes did, forcing us to binge it in that patented Netflix way.
There's no shade in that at all, is there?
None at all.
None at all.
I totally don't prefer the Disney Plus model at all.
Yeah, this would have been a hard show to do, the Disney Plus, because man, these cliffhangers in each episode that we were getting, it's like, oh. But
you mean
again,
people would have been talking about it for a week and coming up with theories and a ton of buzz for 5 straight weeks instead of a weekend? Yeah, that sounds terrible.
No shade at all.
No shade. No shade. I love you guys. Thanks. Hey, thanks for putting this out, Netflix. I just want to put that out there. I do appreciate this coming out.
They're gonna put out. Well, part 2 will be, part 2, 5 new episodes, except for you, Matthew Dooch. You don't get the 5 new episodes. Somehow your Netflix is conveniently not having those 5 episodes because of the shade.
I'll just watch them once a week then, pirated.
Yeah, well, there you go. One way or the other, it will be done.
Just kidding. I do not advocate piracy in any shape or form. And
one day, those guys in the black coats, I'm telling you, they're gonna happen.
They're coming from my hand. Did you download an MP3 from LimeWire on September 18th, 1999? Probably.
Which one?
Most likely.
It's an army of these guys coming in.
I doubt that it all downloaded on the same day. That seems unlikely.
That's true as well.
But on to the show here. Okay.
On to the show.
Poisoned Chalice. So, episode 1 left us with Teela throwing down her tiara, saying, "Forget you guys, I'm out." Mm-hmm. And episode 2 opens up with following 2 mercenaries as they go into a stinky garbage hut.
Yeah, all sorts of fun.
Now, the mercenaries are obviously Teela and Andra. Was there any part of you that did not realize that these were Teela and Andra as we opened up here?
None whatsoever. The trailer definitely gave that away, no matter what you did there. And the only thing, it's like, this is where the time jump happens. So there is that. Now you're trying to figure out how many years between episode 1 and episode 2 have passed. But other than that, Andra, Teela, it's a given.
Yeah, and that was kind of interesting too. Do you kind of wish that they had specified how long it'd been? Because I kept expecting like the 2 years later, or whatever, or even a generalization like a while later, or a long time. Like I wish there'd been some sort of a reference point there, because you are kind of
It,
left throughout this going. I'm thinking a minimum of a year, but it could have
mhm.
possibly been longer depending on some of the stuff we've seen.
Yeah, there's things in this episode specifically where I'm like, that happened very quickly if it only happened in a year. And then there's other things where it's like, well, maybe it was only a year. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it depends, because this episode and next episode really get into the magic getting taken from Eternia.
Yep.
And all that kind of stuff. It's like, okay, so how predominant is the magic to make it that this world is now dying? Because a year to me almost feels like that's too short.
Right.
Because it's a planet, like even with what we talk about with global warming, it's like that's not a year from now,
Right.
with all this stuff. So there is like maybe it's 2 to 5 years.
Yeah.
So it would have been nice. It would have been nice.
Wish, and maybe it's coming. Maybe eventually we'll, when, I don't want to jump too far ahead, but maybe eventually we'll get more of a frame. But right now we're left open. We know some time has passed. But this opening scene seems very much framed as in that you're not sure who's under those ventilator masks, in the mercenary, because they got the mercenary outfits with the cloaks, hooded cloaks, and these ventilator masks. Very reminiscent of the Road Ripper. I felt in style. It felt very Eternian. Those masks did. That was a good touch.
Definitely. I know in the groups, Yuka was actually pointing that he could see the design elements there too, which I was like, there have been people going, what is that? That looks like something. I can't think of what it looks like. There you go. Road Ripper.
Yeah, so. It's got that style. But yeah, the whole scene is kind of framed as like when Tila rips off her mask and does like it feels like that. And I know I'm being my old man Matt, but I'm going back to I wish I'd seen less, because I think that was written and animated to be a big reveal, but because of everything we saw beforehand, it was like, oh yeah, Tila. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and honestly, it's really hard when the first episode is based on what everybody would have. I won't say what they wanted to see, because I want to see the story progress. But the initial trailer with the I Need a Hero was so much that first episode that when we get into the new stuff, it's like there's tons of things just constantly flooding you, going, well, now we know this is going to happen. This and
right.
That's the tricky part about trailers, no matter what you do. So yeah, but this reveal definitely didn't wow me or anything. It made me just go, yeah, I figured it was her. That's cool.
Right.
So.
And well, I guess that's what I'm going. Like they even took the pains. Like the Masterverse toy line was initially said that it was going to be 8 figures in Wave 1, and they even ended up splitting that in half. And I felt that was the reason, because we didn't even see the Tila, the Beast, well, any of them, Tila, Beastman, Spike, or Man-at-Arms, even though Spike or Man-at-Arms are their classic looks.
Yeah.
I felt that was the reason. Like they were trying to hold those things back, but then they pretty much just showed you. So I don't know. It was just kind of weird to me, especially rewatching. I'm like, you know what? I again, it's just me being me. I wish that we'd had that build to where it's like, oh no, that is Tila, because you really don't know where the story's going to go at that point. But regardless, it happened. They have a nice little fight with Stinkor, who had stolen the glove of Galabula, and they had been sent to bring it back. Stinkor looked great. Nice blend of classic and, Mike Young Productions with the tanks on the back and everything. They changed his stench to actually come out of his mouth in a blast now, which I thought was a really gnarly upgrade. I really liked that. More than even the hands, or I guess like vintage mini comic, it felt more like it just kind of came off him, or even like he directed it with his hands. And then, of course, Mike Young, there was a lot of the fart jokes of it. But I really like the idea of him using it as a breath weapon and shooting at more like dragon's breath. That's a cool visual. I like that.
Yeah, and it was amusing to me considering who the voice is, Jason Mewes. Where he says, "Get your hands off my merch." And it's like that's a term I would not have expected on Eternia, but
because he was going. What was it? Was get your hands off my merch, you filthy mercs! Like
Merc.
It was.
Yeah.
So it was that little word play, those little zingers.
Yeah, and then unfortunately, because I actually enjoy when Stinkor shows up both in 2000X and in here for the fact that we never got him in Filmation, and anytime that they bring in anyone who's never been in Filmation, it always makes me go, "You're welcome to stay," because it's fun to have a new character. Unfortunately, he gets taken out pretty easily, and then there is a nice little cute Star Wars reference where Teela does that, sorry about the mess, and flicks, some coin over to the merchant whose barrow or whatever you want to call it just got dropped Stinkor in the middle of and destroyed. And so, honestly, though, it was nice. As weird as it is to say this, it's refreshing to see Stinkor for me. That's just the way it is.
I had the same complaint about the scene. I'm like that was it. So I'm hoping we see him again in the back half, because that was, especially with the fight scenes in this show are very well done, but that one was very quick.
Yes.
But that's because we gotta get going here. We gotta get moving. So basically, Teela and Andra, they return the Glove of Globula, which is actually an artifact from the Vintage Era. Most people didn't know this. Aidan Cross, of course, he runs the great Master Universe UK comic site, and that's exactly where it came from. It was 1986. The UK Masters of the Universe comic magazines. And here is its description in the Character Guide and World Compendium. Unearthed by the Eternos Archaeological Society, the Glove of Globula, when used with its accompanying Book of Spells, was a magical artifact with powers to rival Castle Grayskull's. Though Hordak possessed the glove for a time, he gave it up when the heroic warriors tricked him with a counterfeit copy of the Book of Spells. The glove was subsequently sent to Castle Grayskull for safekeeping. And I have not chased down the story with it. I'm sure there's more information if I find the actual story that's in, but I have not had a chance to do that yet. And I unfortunately do not own the UK comics. Someday.
For anyone who has issues with the show, I found it funny that it was teaching those of us who didn't grow up in the UK. This is a thing, and so it was actually. It was nice. It wasn't just relying on what Americans know for the mythology, which was really cool. But then, oh, go ahead.
No, I'm just gonna say it's great that they're pulling. I mean, they're trying to stick to the Vintage Era as much as possible, but they're still pulling in all this stuff, and trying to rectify some of the contrasting canons.
Yeah, exactly. And again, like in the span of maybe 5 minutes of this episode, give or take, we have another piece of dialogue that had me go, wow. Because then when the priestess thank you for bringing the glove back, and she's explaining, it brings magic to the people in the village and the love from the people and all this. And then Andrew does the no glove, no love, and I'm like, oh, it's another. That one hit me harder than the merch moment, because I was like, I know that phrase, and that's the one I didn't ever think would be on a show like this. But okay, they did that too. And no, this is not me wanting to complain. That was just one there. I'm like, boom! They just said that. Okay.
I felt this one was definitely reaching for some of these, and I don't want to say it's. it's not necessarily the weakest written episode, but I think just because it's got a lot of exposition, and so I think this one plays a bit slower than the other 4 episodes.
Mm.
But we get a lot of good information in it coming up, and that's basically what this is all leading to. Then we'll get there. So, so then we have the after they return the glove to the leader of this church, who's saying, hey, people are basically either, and this sets up the whole stage with what we're going to see with Triclops and his band. Basically, Eternia is devolving. It's losing its magic. What little there is left. These magical artifacts are very sought after, and people are either going one of two ways. Either they're denouncing magic, or they're really just flocking to it. Like, if we can just hang on to these last scraps of magic, maybe the planet will get better. Because that's the other thing. You notice that the planet is starting to. There's a bit more desert, dry areas. It's not looking as wholesome as it was an episode ago. So again, that's another thing that kind of goes, well, how long has this been? And after they return the glove to the church leader, then they're approached by an old woman out of the shadows who calls herself Majestra, who hires Tila and Andra to go and find an old chalice that belonged to a dead friend of hers, and to bring it back to her. She wants something to remember him by. And she, of course, says she'll pay them, handsomely, and that the chalice is in none other than Snake Mountain. To which Andra completely freaks out, and Tila is just like, okay, yeah, let's do this. We'll be back in 2 days.
Simple. Just that simple.
Well, that's what I loved about that scene, and it really puts you in the shoes of Andra, who's like, you really get the feeling she's just coming out into the world here. Like, whatever village she was raised in, she managed to live there. They didn't necessarily have direct contact with the outside world. She hasn't been up in the face of evil warriors. She knows about Skeletor. She's heard about the Horde in ancient times. She even says, jumping ahead a little bit, but she even says later that Grayskull is a place her grandfather used to tell her stories of. Like, she knows the history, but she has never set foot in the Evergreen Forest. She's never been at the Jawbridge, and so she's freaking out. She's like, Snake Mountain? Are you kidding me? And Tila just like, I used to go there once a week,
Yeah.
And it's a nice contrast, and you really get that Andra is kind of our view into this post-apocalyptic Eternia, that she's here to guide us, to ask the questions that we would ask and help give us the frame of reference as to what is and isn't. And I thought she worked very well in that aspect.
Yeah, I didn't mind her. She's like, I know there was a lot of controversy, but once I saw her on the show, it's like she kind of fit in the way, like, on Filmation, you would always have that one-off character show up on an episode, and that would be the person that's key to the story they're going to tell, like, or have someone like Malaktha, where he showed up a couple different times or whatever. I kind of viewed her as that in this case, like, if this was a movie, this is that character they added to the mix just to have a little something different, and also, like you said, be the gateway person into the rest of the story for us. So. And also, it's kind of fun. She's also a character that plays into the power set being the way it is right now, because Tila renouncing magic, renouncing her past, and then now she teamed up with a girl who is similar to Duncan, where she is an inventor and she's using technology, and that underlines her mentality right now, that here's my partner and she can do all these things, and I'm the brawn and she's the brain.
Right.
It works really well in that kind of a storytelling sense for me.
And I like how, even though she had, not only did she renounce the royal family, but she's, obviously not talking to her father, but she's still leaning into his way. Like, that is like she's still his daughter. She is man at arms. She's leaning on the tech, her own resources. She became a mercenary to survive, and to earn money, and that staff. She got that nice staff that can go from a bow staff to a sword to spear.
Mm-hmm.
Now that reminded me so much of what kind of the stuff they do in Mike Young with the telescoping and everything else, and
Mm-hmm.
I thought it fit perfectly. Her new weapon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it even reminded me of on Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Like Donatello's staff would do all these different things. Like it makes sense if you have a bow, you need it to be a little more utilitarian than just it's a stick.
Right.
So in that way, that doesn't look as lame as a weapon as it typically would be when I was a kid. And when I first saw Donatello, I was like, he's got a stick. I was never wowed by that character because his weapon just really didn't work for me. That's just me.
Yeah, so they take the deal, and then actually it switches immediately to a shot of Tila trapped in the net at Snake Mountain, but dressed in her classic outfit, and this this threw my kids for a minute when we were watching it the first time. They're like, "Why is she back in that?" And even I, for a minute, was like, "Yeah, why did she change back?" And then once she climbs out using Whiplash's tail, I'm like, "Oh no, I see what's going on. This is the first of the flashbacks we get where she is remembering a time that her and He-Man stormed Snake Mountain, and you've got the platform with the Wolf's Gate, with the trapdoor, with the net." So vintage playset. It was awesome. And nice vintage Whiplash, who is one of the most awesome evil warriors ever. I don't think even Shawn can deny here that classic Whiplash fighting He-Man and Tila just looked an impressive and a worthy adversary.
This actually from just a character design standpoint is my favorite Whiplash that they've ever made. I loved them. I liked the 2000X one where he was bulky just because of the body type being different. But this one, it's like, oh, he looks like he's a force to be reckoned with. I like even like when you see the tail. Holy crap! That's how they're making his tail
it's
on
like
this show.
Yeah, it's the vintage alligator tail. It's all muscle. It's wide.
Yes.
He's wide but lean, if that makes sense. Unlike, I like Mike Young too, but he was very much that tubby body. Like he had the big belly and everything, like the big guy. This was, like I said, this was like alligator. It was lean, but like you can just see by looking at it, it's like he's gonna crush you if he gets his hands on you.
Yeah, and that the thing about like for me at least with this show, I know I made the comment about Clawful where I really liked his design in the last episode. This one for me is like, wow, like I want to actually see a cartoon where they go back and do the vintage stuff looking like they do here and give us, like fill out that instead of giving us the future stuff, because they did such a great job of modernizing these characters. And I mean, Filmation fans are Filmation fans, but when I see these characters, I'm like, this is how I pictured them in my head, because they definitely look more formidable and they look a lot more, they look capable and they look menacing compared to Filmation. They would always give you that, like, we're not going to try to scare you, kids. Yes, it's the villain, but we're going to make it a little less menacing. And it's like, no, I always wanted menacing with this because it makes sense,
Absolutely. So He-Man and Tila end up beating Whiplash by doing a nice. He-Man swings Tila in a nice roundabout maneuver. She kicks him into the net, and then we get a nice exchange between the two, where He-Man says, "I'll go if you go." So just remember that. Put in your back pocket. We'll get back to it. And then where we flash forward, we come back to the present day, and we got Tila and Andra standing in the same spot, but unfortunately, the Wolf's Gate has been severely upgraded. Laser bars and sensors, and basically, if they breathe on it, it's going to blow up. So Tila figures the only way in is by opening the old trap door, jumping down on the net, and digging their way in, because they did not reinforce that at all, to enter the Snake Mountain. And I gotta say, it was nice coming back to Snake Mountain. It was nice seeing the vintage look, but then even the upgraded look. As we find out that Triclops took over, I really felt that number one, Triclops has always been in the lead for me to take over in Skeletor's absence. I know Classics did Jitsu and New Adventures, if they'd gotten their second season, would have even done Man at Arms. Spoiler alert. But I've always felt that Triclops was was one of the top runners to take over in Skeletor's absence. He always struck me as that kind of guy.
Mm-hmm. Well, if you like Filmation, he wasn't on enough. But if you look at the 2000X version, he was the brains. I mean, it's like you had that hierarchy of Skeletor, then really close to it was Evil Lyn, and then he would have been right after that because he was always inventing things. And he even went out of his way to come up with, like, I'm going to show Skeletor I can do this myself on the Roboto's Gambit episode. So, yeah, I agree with you. If you go on that canon of sorts, it works for me in that way too.
And that's, and promise I'm not going to rabbit hole. This might be something we can spin off on another episode because I want to stick to what's in the show. But we've already said we'd love to see what happened more in the classic era. Show us some stories from then. I'd love to see what happened between Triclops and Evil Lyn, because Evil Lyn didn't just give up Snake Mountain. That had to have been. And here again, this is why I'd like to know how much time has passed, because Triclops has Snake Mountain fully decked out. He's got sensors, lights, circuitry, like he's coated the walls, like he's reinforced everything. And he's got this whole army of alkalites that, he has transformed into mechanical monsters like himself in Trapjaw, and even Whiplash has been changed. Yeah. And so, that didn't just happen overnight. There's no way Evil Lyn just gave up willingly and walked away. I'm sure that was a conflict in and of itself that has already resolved itself. And Triclops, his whole cult that he's got going on was freaky as all get out. You see Trapjaw's been upgraded. Like I said, Whiplash has robotic parts. Even Triclops has some extra, like you can see in his arms, he's got some circuitry and stuff now. Like, he has really gone the way of, away from magic. He feels that's Skeletor's downfall, as he was always relying on magic, and technology is where it's at. Technology is going to save him. And he is using this chalice that they've sent to get, and some sort of goop coming out of Screech, which it was a nice throwback, because in Filmation, Screech was that giant robotic bird. And so Triclops has her hooked up and is like draining this motor oil looking stuff with nanites in it out of her. And basically, whenever anybody drinks it, they get these robotic parts. And it's some freaky stuff in here. I was watching my kids to make sure they weren't too freaked out during this part.
Yeah, it was. Kevin Smith posted it was a social media post where he said that there were movies from the 80s that they had as reference points of what was going to be the theme of the episode.
Oh yeah,
if I remember right, this one was Temple of Doom.
Okay.
And when you go into that sequence, it like I was actually thinking that just now, like, it reminds me of like when Indy and a Short Round are there, and they get to watch the first moment of the sacrifice. Then you get to see this is what is going on here, and they're horrified, and it's like when you watch this part, it gets into some stuff where you're just sitting there like, for my own kids, when Evan was watching it with me, she was worried about the little girl that was there, the father and the little girl and stuff. And like the dad drinks from the chalice and and all that stuff, and then you see him changing, and then she turned to me, she goes, "What about the little girl?" I go, "She wasn't there. I'm hoping she's okay." And it's that whole, maybe Tila's going to get her out of there or something.
That's what I thought too. I thought Tila was going to save her, and then go ahead, do it.
And when they get to the point that they try to get the little girl, she's looking away from them, and her head just does the Exorcist turn, and she smiles at them in a way where if a girl did that, a little kid looked at me like that,
I'd be running.
I would probably start screaming, "The power of Christ compels you," and run the other direction.
Right?
This one it was a slow setup for this one, because it didn't just start right off with, this is the point of the episode, and it built towards it. But once you got to this part, there is an element of, holy crap, like it's interesting too, because this whole series relies on the dynamic of, if you take away the two major players in this,
right,
you just see, it's almost like you take the parents away, what happens when the kids get to rule the place, in a sense. And it's interesting because it does show you, here's the faction dynamics we have here. Here's who joined up with who. And here's how far some of these people have taken it.
Right.
With Skeletor not being there to check Triclops, or with, Tila doing her own thing, and He-Man's not there to be a voice of reason to pull her back home again and all that. But yeah, I was actually pretty... honestly, I'll say this. It's not my favorite episode of the 5. I don't really know if there's one that I like less than the others. I feel like it just, when I play it, it just plays.
Yeah.
But this one definitely has like the, wow, like they went to some darker places than I would have ever expected them to on this.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's it, really. It's this episode is all the setup. It's showing you the central powers and everything, and so you've got to get through all that. So, but yeah, this scene in Snake Mountain is great. The battle scene, Andrew gets some time to shine. She, she launches that saw blade into Trapjaw's face, which
that was.
I thought Trapjaw was dead. I'm gonna put it right there. I'm gonna leave it here for now. I thought for sure, I'm like, well, there goes Trapjaw. Like, okay, we killed off another person. Okay. But I'm like, dude just took a saw blade to the face. Like,
yes.
So yeah. I was sure Trapjaw was dead. Oh, we got to see Blast Attack. He was there as well. He was interesting. I couldn't get a good read on what makes him blow up. But the fact that they kind of inputted, or basically it seemed like whenever he was defeated, like it would trigger like a self-destruct sequence, seemed to be how they were playing it. Like when he got knocked down, his chest would start beeping and lighting up, and if he punched in a certain code, it would disarm.
Yeah.
Which was an interesting twist on it. We always think about him either as the break apart guy that hops around and fights you, or like the concussion blast, like he just comes in and just blows himself up, knocking people out. So that was a neat twist, although it seemed to get activated really easily, I guess, because there was a few moments throughout it where he's like having to shut himself off again, and I'm like, okay, but I can get behind this interpretation, and that's a neat thing. It's like, so basically, if he gets defeated, he's programmed to self-destruct. Makes a lot more sense than, I'm going to build this robot just to send him in and blow him up immediately.
Yeah.
Or hoppy, punchy.
I actually, I mean, the comedic value there for me, like, I have no owning to that character whatsoever. He came out so far into the line that I really was like, okay, Scareglo's on the peg, fine. I'm going to get my Ghostbusters toys this week or whatever. So he was in that era of, I was fading from Masters pretty quickly. So to see him show up here, and the comedic relief was amusing, just to have him go every time that he managed to get that code in time. But yeah, it does bring into question like the premise of that is just nutty to begin with. So I like that they did make a little bit of like hey, let's have some fun with that at least on this.
And I think this moment needed it. Like you said, when that girl turns around and basically what happened, guys, is her father had already taken the drink. And so you were left to be like, okay, I'm hoping Tila will save her. But by the time Tila gets to her, the little girl had already gone and gotten a drink herself in order to change, to help. That's how desperate these people are. That's how desperate some of these Eternians are right now. That their villages are dying, their crops are dying, and they see no other way. But the going mechanical offers them salvation, because then you're not running on the same stuff, you know? So I think people are seeing that as an outlet, and it definitely adds a gray area into the whole series that was not there. You know, we saw it start to get hinted at in Mike Young Productions, but, you know, the gray area has not been explored a lot in Masters. It's always been very much black and white, good versus evil. So, but this whole world past He-Man and Skeletor after their death is very much like, you know, is there as much right or wrong? And that's all going to culminate here in a little bit at Castle Grayskull. But we'll get there. But the escape scene was great. I love seeing, you know, we saw Doom Seekers in this. We saw the old gargoyles that used to adorn the tops of the statue or the columns in Filmation, and even on their way out, seeing all the gates was very reminiscent of the MB Creations comic Snake Mountain. But the best part was when they're going past the pools. We actually see those pools of slime, ooze, whatever, toxic waste. And they've got Tila and Andrew have one grenade left and all those acolytes behind them. And Andrew's getting ready to throw it at the group, try and take as many as she can. And Tila just lobs it into the slime. And those tentacles from the vintage playset that was only a sticker just come out and just start going crazy, just attacking anything. I'm like, it's those moments that just make you go, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, you know, I know there's a lot of people, Filmation was not a toy advertisement, but there are moments in this where I'm like, they could have had a lot more fun sometimes if they would have let it be a little more toy advertisement by showing moments like that, because it would have only made you go back to the place and go, oh, I need to do this now because they brought that into the show today or whatever. So,
well, and that's the beauty of doing Revelation, you know, 30 years after, or 40 years, 40 years.
Going on 40 years, yeah.
You're old, Sean.
Yes.
I was not alive for the premiere, so I am not, unlike you and Rob Bass. But
yeah, well, and he and I don't sleep very much. I know that.
I love you, Rob. But yeah, no, it was just great seeing those little nods. Like, okay, yeah, it's just those fun little things. But yeah, that whole Snakebound sequence was my favorite scene in this episode. That was definitely the highlight. The battle was fun and everything. And then we head back to the Temple of Globula. It's never really named, but we'll go with Temple of Globula, where they meet back up with Majestra. And she gives them their payment, thanks them, and she asks for if they want to join her and return it to its rightful place, basically, which she says is Castle Grayskull. And this one, Tila's a bit more hesitant about. Snake Man she was good with, but she's not ready to go back there yet. And again, these first 5 are Tila dealing with grief. And I think this was very much a part of her denial. Like, no, the last time I was in there was when I saw He-Man Adam killed. Like, I don't want to go there. And but Andrea says she's gonna do it whether she comes or not. So Tila reluctantly does end up going with her.
I'll go if you go.
I'll go with you go. Yeah, she's fine. She's finding these replacements for her old friends, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's
And
tough. It's tough for her.
it is, and I thought I like the dynamic, especially right here between them, because there is that element of Andra knows of the legend of Tila because that's why she teamed up with her, and there is that she knows there's a history of all these adventures, and Andra's basically at the very beginning of hers and going, well, I'm doing it if you're not, because you've already done all this stuff, and it's my chance to be a hero. And you know, I really like that aspect of it where Tila's just doing the whole, you know, like you got to realize what you're saying when you're saying you want to be a hero. There's
like it's
things
everything.
There. It's everything. Exactly.
You're giving your all. You get consumed by it.
Yeah.
And,
so
and
I like that a lot.
And you know, I kind of get the feeling that while Andra knows of Tila, and obviously she knows who Tila is, it doesn't ever feel like she knows much specifics. Like they don't actually talk about that time. You know what I mean? Because I think and coming up in an episode or so, we definitely get a bit of that where it feels like even now with her kind of going back to Snake Mountain stuff, like this is the first time Tila has really talked about, you know, her time with He-Man or anything. Like that's she's shut herself off from that. It's like Andra knows this is Captain Tila, but basically Tila's just looking at like from the day she left the palace is from then on is all she talks about. Like she shut everything else off because otherwise Andra should know a bit more, it seems, and not have to ask as many questions. But Tila's definitely put the wall up. Like, look, we'll do this. We'll be mercenaries, whatever. But you don't talk about that. Like, you don't. She probably asked her before, and she's like, "Yeah, we don't talk about that. We don't.
Yeah,
I'm good. That was my past life." So, but they journey. That you know, she ends up getting roped in. And they wind up in Castle Grayskull, and I love it when they descend back down into the chamber where the orb was. You know, basically, they talk about how King Randor has declared Castle Grayskull a forbidden zone. No one's allowed to go there. It's all desolate. It looks like the Hall of Wisdom. The Grayskull facade is gone. It's just a rundown Hall of Wisdom at this point, and. So they head down to the chamber and they see Sorceress standing basically right where the orb was, you know, holding a small piece of magic, and she's looking drawn. She's looking old.
Yeah. Yeah, it's 87 movie-esque to me every time I see that. Yeah.
Yeah, she's still got her traditional outfit on at this point, but she's very weathered. And I like how Tila just, you know, they walk in with Majestra, the old lady, and Tila's pretty much like, "All right, Evil Lynn, you gonna tell us what you're really here for?" Like, and I like that they didn't make her dumb, you know, like she knew from the get-go that this was Evil Lynn, and she didn't care. Like, Evil Lynn's gonna pay me to get a cup from Snake Mountain? Absolutely, you know?
Yeah.
And that's probably, honestly, the only reason she went with Andra, because she knew who it was, and she's like, well, I can't let Andra go alone with this witch, you know?
Exactly.
But I like that. It shows Tila as smart and formidable, and basically she was just waiting to get her here to figure out what her plan is if she couldn't figure out beforehand.
Yeah, I really I get a kick out of some of that stuff, and just the fact that you could see again, that's the time passage thing, and the whole, you know, okay, we're removing from the original because there is this feeling, even it's like she's paid to go up against Triclops. She wouldn't do that as he needs to be stopped today or whatever. Like, it's not on our schedule to go and deal with Snake Mountain. It just ended up that's where it had to go.
Right.
She has no dog in this race anymore because of what she did. And like you said, it's more of a mentor mentee situation where her as the mentor of Andra, she's like, I'm not going to let you do that by yourself at this point. That's her line. It's like, she's not going to, she will be there with Andra in danger because she could probably help her in danger, but she's not going to send her into danger and just be like, well, and just walk away from it. So
exactly.
So yeah, I like that quite a lot.
No, I agree, and this whole sequence, and I'm sure I'm going to jumble it up a little bit here, listeners. My apologies, but there is a lot at this point. This is basically what the whole show is. This episode has been building to. So, Evelyn heads towards the sorceress, who's basically just standing, pretty much seems catatonic. You get the feeling, honestly, that she has pretty much been standing there since the incident, it feels like, because she is, as we find out, she is holding on to the last shard of magic in Eternia, just this little ember that she managed, in all the melee and all the explosions, she managed to grab on to this one flame of magic, and she has just been kind of holding it there since, trying to figure out what to do. Like, where do we go from here? With Skeletor cracking open the orb of the Elders, all the powers just exploded to who knows where. It's gone.
Yeah.
And I don't get a little ahead of myself, but it all flows together, folks. But yeah, so Evelyn makes a move to go for the sorceress before we know all this, and Tila goes to attack her, throwing her weapon at her. And Cringer jumps in, and this took me by surprise when I'm like, oh, Cringer's here. Like, this is where he went, which was surprising. I just assumed that he'd be back at the palace, but I guess with everything else, like, he has even cut ties with the royal family, and you get the feeling that he's been here this whole time, just guarding the sorceress.
Yeah, and the next part, there is some big splaining to do, because we don't get a glimpse of what's going on with Randor or Marlena. No. And ironically, as a kid, I had no interest in those characters because they were mom and dad who gave a crap about that, basically. But in the case of the setup of this entire story, I want to see what the deal is with these characters, because everybody has either been told to get out of the castle, or just they're done with it too. So, like, what happened? We know what happened, but what happened with them?
Do you remember? Did Cringer even journey back to the palace? I'm trying to think.
Cringer and Orko, they were in the palace when Tila resigned.
Were they? Okay, I couldn't remember Cringer all of a sudden.
They both were there because when Randor did his big speech, and then Tila responded while she's basically pointing at everybody and doing the you knew, and Cringer put his head down. Orko looked, he had his head in shame too. So they were all there when that moment happened. So
this isn't even like Cringer just stayed here after the final battle. He went back to the palace. Obviously, whatever happened, he left, and he wound up here. Like, well, where else do I go? I'll go with the sorceress, and I'll protect her. And we find out that basically, like we've said, this is where it all gets explained, guys. If you haven't watched it, go watch it. It's actually a great scene. Great. I love the animation, the effects, the magic explained and everything. But basically, the sorceress gives up that last bit of magic. She stores it in Evelyn's staff to give Evelyn a power boost, because she's weak, just like every other magic user on Eternia is weak at this point. Keep that in your back pocket, viewers. So sorceress gives Evelyn the last flame. In doing that, she gives up the powers of the sorceress. She's stripped down to Tilana, white robes, old lady, like, okay, she has nothing left. She's given it all. We find out that the Poisoned Chalice was actually the top of the Havoc staff, in disguise, which she also they use that power in it as well. I don't think they. It's kind of unclear if they actually like fuse it into her staff or if they're just using the power of it. But basically, they needed all that. But that's like the last couple big powers on Eternia is the head of that Havoc staff and that flame that the sorceress had, and they put it all on the Evelyn staff because this is all or nothing. Magic is gone from Eternia. It was the first planet in creation. Eternia was. It needs It needs the magic to survive. It is a magical planet. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. It is dying like an unwatered house plant. And the only thing that can call the magic back from where it's dispersed into the cosmos, the only thing that can channel it back, call upon the power, is of course
the Power Sword.
The Power
Prince
Sword.
Adam. Yep. Calling down the power.
As Tila says, but the Power Sword was destroyed in the final battle.
It was separated in the final battle. It was divided. I think is the proper term. It became two pieces, the light and the dark half. Which, as a fan of that mini comic canon, you couldn't have warmed my heart more than knowing they finally went there with this series, because I was so let down as a kid that they didn't at least try to do that storyline somehow. And here it is. And I do enjoy that quite a lot. They went there. And I like that it's something, it wasn't just as we saw in the prequel comic, it's not just something they just introduced like, oh, the power just shattered the sword. No, it was already two pieces to begin with. He-Man the entire time has had one whole power sword. Like every kid wanted in the 80s, by the way. I'm sorry. We wanted that whole power sword. Thank you, Classics, because they gave us that. But yeah, I love the fact that it goes from the beginning, and now there were always two pieces of it. He-Man just had the whole piece, the whole sword together the entire time.
And I really like that. I like that King Grayskull forged the two halves together into the power sword. And that it was then placed in Castle Grayskull, and Adam got a whole power sword, because you know me, I've never liked that. I don't mind the two halves idea, but I never liked the, hey, here's the two halves, join them together. All right, end of the mini comic, split them apart. Beginning of next mini comic, put the two halves back together. All right, split them apart. No, it does not work as a to me personally, it does not work as a consistent storyline. Like every day we're resetting. Every time we join them together, we then have to split them apart again. I like that it wasn't meant to be split back apart. Like King Grayskull took these two ores of power, created this sword, but just this explosion of magic was just so immense that it literally sent them. It's like you had a loaf of bread and it got hit so hard that it turned back into eggs, water, and flour. That's a big punch, you know.
And
I really
like
Ramstone. Yeah, the Ramstone kind of knocking the He-Man out of you.
Knock the power of Grayskull right the hell out of him in that episode. And the thing is, like, like the superconductor aspect of it from the first episode was something where, for me as a kid, it's like I never actually did the whole, well, what if he said the incantation again? Because technically he did when he did the drawbridge. He didn't say I have the power, but he always, by the power of Grayskull, I can drawbridge open. But in this case,
which even that kind of, not to cut you off, but that kind of shows that, you know, the I have the power was kind of the more significant part of the incantation, right? Because by the power of Grayskull can do a couple different things.
Yes, exactly.
I never thought about it that way. And and that kind of goes back to what we were saying the last episode about how in this one, the I have the power is kind of what seals the power into him.
Yes. And even the prequel comic went there, which that was one of my parts that I loved a lot. But it's like, you know, Grayskull didn't say by the power of Grayskull. He just went, I have the power. And bam, the Snake Men were just, you know, wrecked.
Right.
And, in that way, it's like, yeah, that's, if you want the part that's going to seal the deal, and everybody as kids knew, I have the power. It was always, that was the line. Yes, the whole incantation matters, but when you hit, I have the power, everybody knew that. So it worked for me on that level of what, like you said, it seals the deal that now you have the power until you release the power again.
Yep. Hold that in your back pocket, guys. Hold it in your back pocket.
Oh, and,
we'll get
and
there.
really quick, I forgot to mention on last episode, the first episode, when Chris Wood says by the power of Grayskull as He-Man, that's how you do it, by the way. Because I watched it just the other day, and when he did by the power, I was like, why do you have to do the other way? The sincerity, it's so earnest. It's like, no, just bellow it, man, let it out. Maybe they'll let him do that in the next part. Again, who knows?
We'll see. We'll get to the next part.
That was my one thing about the new transformation. I was just like, it left me a little wanting. But when he does, I have the power, it blows the roof off the joint still. So
absolutely.
Anyway, back to this moment, because this is a great moment coming up that we're about to talk about.
And so basically, the sorcerer says, like, she has given all the big magic they could come up with. I mean, we're not stealing Glove of Globula, but we've taken everything else, all the big stuff we've got, we've given it to Evelyn.
Yep.
We need the power sword back. You need to track down the two halves, and you need to reforge them into one using this last flame of power that we have. Like that, this is it. There's no other way. It's this or the world dies. And Teela's ready to go, nah, I'm good. And check out. And I was like, okay. They went there. She is doubling down. I mean, think about it. This is the first time she's been in this room in, I'm going to say 2 years. To me, this feels like it has to have been at least a couple years since everything went down. And she's sitting in this room. She's looking. She looks at one point. She looks at the scorch mark left on the floor where He-Man and Skeletor last stood. Like, I can't even imagine the trauma that is flashing through her head right now.
Yeah. I can't. I mean, heck, I had a bad enough breakup in high school that I didn't want to go by my girlfriend's house ever again, and I made pains to drive alternate routes if I had to.
Anywhere.
So it's like, imagine how that would have felt, walking in and knowing that's where you last saw your best friend and he died. Like, that's nuts.
And you're mad at him too.
And you're mad at him too.
You can't forget that. I mean, and it's very valid for her to be mad at him. I think that's pretty much been a given that when she ever finds out, she will be mad at him. Like that. But for him to not give her that chance to yell at him, like, that makes it worse. Like I said, they really went to the depths of where Teela could go with all of this. And I mean, she's written very well. She's written very consistently across these 5 episodes that we've seen, where I'm rooting for her to heal and to find her way, to find her path that she's lost. And I can't even imagine the depths of what she's going through. And at the same time, then being tasked like, you're our last hope. And to me, it is that. It's who do you call now? He-Man's gone. Who would you call in this situation? Absolutely the former captain of the Royal Guard.
Yeah.
And I think the only reason the sorceress hasn't called her sooner is because she's been busy trying to keep this Ember alive, And she had to get Evelyn there first. And, she probably sent Cringer to get Evelyn. I mean, there's a whole story in itself. Because by the time Evelyn gets there, she's already got this plan with the sorcerer. She's already been there. They've already talked. They already know what they're going to do.
Yeah, and I like that. How does she word something along the lines of, I see that our thing, we're in alignment on how we're viewing this. Yeah, it's a very, not tumultuous, but just, it's an unsteady truce they're doing, because there is evil and can die, and so can the sorceress and everyone else who's magical. Yeah,
right. They need the magic. That's the only reason they've joined. But they're very upfront about that. Like, I don't trust you, but I see no other way. Like, we have to. And I love the interaction with Cringer and Tila, where he's telling, look, you serve Grayskull, you serve Snake Mountain. It doesn't matter at this point. We're fighting for the life of the planet. And there's only one way to do it, and that's together. And he goes back, he reminds her of the past. He's like, you named me Cringer, because I was always afraid of everything. And he's like, I love it. The Cringer being a little smart butt. He's like, I don't know much, but I know how to tell when someone's scared. We may act differently, but you're just as scared as I ever was. And that hits her to the core, and that is what it is. She's scared. She's scared of getting attached to somebody again. She's scared of having to trust people, I only, like I said, Andrew and her had this partnership, the mercenary thing, but she hasn't trusted her. She hasn't told her story. She hasn't told her past. Like, they are coworkers, They're and it's just, you don't get the same vibe as you did from Tila in the flashbacks, which we'll see more of, or even from that first episode. Like, it's not the same Tila. She is afraid to commit herself to anybody. She is all about herself.
Yeah, it has that like Batman and Robin aspect of it. Like, but at the beginning, when Dick Grayson is still young, and it's it's more do as I say, not as I do sort of a deal, and there is that camaraderie. But Stephen Root for me took he was one of the hardest ones on the voice side of things to actually go, I can accept it, or it's sounding weird to me. But
I'm still not sold on it, I guess I could say. Like, the lines are great. It's a great performance, but he took it in a really, he actually played it straight when you're expecting Stephen Root to do a little something, because he's known for those, I don't want to say goofy voices, but those off voices, those quirky voices. And so I was expecting something more along those lines, but he actually played it pretty straight. So that was interesting.
Yeah, like when they cast him, I automatically in my head, I'm like, if you do a cross between Office Space and Dodgeball, you kind of have a Cringer. And it's like, I wasn't expecting him to go legit like Alan Oppenheimer. We're gonna really make it sense, but having that little stutter, a little bit of
stutter.
hesitancy,
just something. A little something.
And that was one of those things, like when he's like, everybody dies, and I'm like, that's like he's holding out some of these sounds and the words that make me go like, that feels weird. It almost feels, I don't know the best way to describe the actual like, this is how it sounds to me. It was hard.
And again, we only have, because unfortunately Mike Young did not believe in a talking Cringer, which they should have. But so we only have the one voice to go up. I think that's a part of it too, because you figure everybody else, we've had at least 2 main incarnations. So you can, and I really felt that Mike Young, they didn't try and copy Filmation, but they definitely did their research beforehand, and they especially with the main cast, they paid homage, and they did it in the style, but to their own strengths. But Cringer, we've only got Alan from the 80s. So his, I think, no matter what, would have taken the most. But I agree, as I feel about another character that's coming up, I think his Cringer needed just a little more. Just a little, like you said, just a little stutter, just a little bit of that quirkiness that Stephen Root's known for. I think that's the biggest thing. If it had been anybody else, it wouldn't have been as glaring, but I'm like, you're Stephen Root. I've heard you do these voices before. That would have been closer than what we got. He's very well spoken in this, which I think throws me.
Yeah, and honestly, again, 2 years, whatever the time jump is, there is a part of me that almost forgives it for the fact that he's probably seen some stuff in that time, and also he witnessed Adam getting dying as well. So there is certain elements where I could see, like Tila and like other characters we're going to see, he is evolving as a character. He's not going to always be this fraidy cat because he has been standing watch with the sorceress. But again, it's the initial like there's definitely one coming up in the next episode where when I heard the voice, I'm like, this is not what I was thinking at all. And unfortunately, like I don't think he did a bad job at all. But and in this episode, he's the soul of the episode. He's the heart and soul of that with that speech he gives her, and that worked nicely. Once you got over the initial, he doesn't sound cringer, but when he did that speech, it's like that was delivered in a way where at the end of it, I'm like, no, this is working for me. I just needed this as my warm up to it now, and like I can handle it.
I think even if it had been this episode where he's a bit more articulated, but it was the same in episode 1 when we heard him. That's the thing. If he had done the stutter back then, and then he was more like I've grown up, I've conquered my fears, I'm evolving, whatever, I think it would have been easier to swallow. But he did that. We just glossed over it because Cringer wasn't as big of a part last episode. But it's always been this well-spoken voice throughout it. If it'd been a time jump thing, it might have been a little less glaring, but it is what it is. Like I said, it's a great speech, and it gets Tila in the game, and
good kitty.
I love that scene where like she reaches down and pets him, and he like nuzzles the side of her face. I'm like, it's moments like that where I'm like, that's Filmation. Like that is pure something you would see at the end of an episode of Filmation as they're sitting around at the palace, like, oh, Cringer, and it just again, it's just those moments that throw me back, that make me feel like I was when I was a kid experiencing all this for the first time. And this episode wraps up with Tila saying that the only thing left to do is, before they find the swords, is to find somebody who can reforge them. Dun dun dun. And we'll get into
a cameo.
We'll get into who that may be next episode.
That we will.
Final thoughts. It's just, I will say it is my least favorite of the series we've seen so far. I mean, and that's not a slam on it. It's just they had so much to do to explain and to accomplish it. It had to go boom, 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 and you didn't get the big action pieces with Stinker that we're expecting. Even the fight, honestly, with the Alkalites was a little bit shorter than you would think it would be. It was an easy getaway, just because they had to keep going. They had a lot to accomplish in this episode, more so than the other ones, I feel.
Yeah, this one, it just goes back to, you're setting up the beginnings of the new version of everything. And so there is this one very much is it takes a little getting used to. And honestly, like some of the stuff that they went to in this episode made me kind of go, it feels a little like how my headcanon was. Not like going all to the motherboard and live in diode and all that stuff, but there is this creepiness to this episode that I really miss from Filmation. And I'm like, this is kind of the way that I always like seeing it. Like there is more darkness in this episode. There is definitely more mystery in this one. And I really enjoyed that. But I think out of the 5, I hate saying it, but this one is the one where I watch it to get to the next episode more than I want to watch it because I want to watch this episode.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely necessary. And that's a great way of putting it, Shawn. I didn't think about it that way, because really, episode 1 is the end of the classic era, the vintage, or whatever. It's the end. And this episode really is like episode 1 of this arc. It's setting up everything that we're going to go through in the next 3 episodes. in order to try and save Eternia from dying. And so, yeah, it's really got that feel of a first episode. Your mind's tricked because it is episode 2 of this series.
Exactly. Yeah. And I don't know. There are definitely moments too that I feel like there could have been a little more to it, just like in the first episode. There could have been a little more to it, but it's like the whole 25 minutes and all that stuff. Yeah. So it is what it is. There, you get Tila and the Andrew relationship and their mentor-mentee and all that. And like I said, she didn't really take away from the show for me. She actually was a nice little addition.
Yep.
And I mean, Triclops. I mean.
Yes.
Damn. Triclops, Trapjaw, Whiplash. I mean, it all, it's like when you see this stuff, it's like, man, they're going like Mad Max on some of this stuff now. This is nuts. So yeah, final thought for me is looking forward to the next episode. And I'd say Cringer probably gets the MVP for that speech 100%. Because man, it's like only he. I love that too. That they focused it. I know what being scared looks like, and that's how you. I love that part in particular. Completely sold that whole bit for me. So,
no, I absolutely agree. Like I said, I feel it's the weakest of the episodes, but again, these are all great episodes in my opinion. So the weakest is still good.
Yeah. Exactly.
But yeah, it had me pumped, and this is another one we rolled right through. Skip the credits, play the next button.
Yep. And get into it.
And just like we'll be doing next episode, we be getting right into the most dangerous man on Eternia. So. We thank you guys for joining us. We're going to take off. Make sure you like, subscribe, share, ring that bell so you get notified when we go live. And until next time.
Oh, come on. Bear. Oh.